and welcome to another UTRGV UTeach Microlecture. Today's microlecture is going to be on classroom management strategies, Part 1, how to get your students' attention and keep it. In this classroom management microlecture series, we will be covering classroom management strategies that fit in the following 5 broad categories: getting your students' attention and keeping it, nonverbals, keeping students engaged, reinforcing positive behavior, and clear and consistent consequences. Some of the strategies that we will be going through in this series will fit in more than one category. That's not only okay, it's a great thing. Make sure to pay special attention to those strategies because they will be particularly effective for your students. Today, we'll be focusing on Part 1, getting your students' attention and keeping it. It's time for a 5-second pause and think. Please take 5 seconds to pause and think about the following question. Why do you need to get your students' attention? How is this related to classroom management? To answer that question, let's look at what happens if you don't have your students' attention. As you can see, if you don't have your students' attention, it's impossible to move on with the lesson. So how do you get your students' attention? Let's watch another video for clues. This time, watch to see what strategies the teacher successfully uses to get and keep the class's attention. Notice the difference? This time, the teacher was able to get and keep the students' attention using the following strategies. The first is called an attention getter. An attention getter is just what it sounds like. It's a simple phrase or saying that gets the student's attention. There are lots of examples of attention getters, such as eyes on me or give me 5. Some attention getters require a response from the students. For example, if you hear me, clap once. If you hear me, clap twice. I've also heard teachers use the phrase class, class, and the students reply yes, yes. Or when I say peanut butter, you say jelly. Another one is called waterfall. The teacher says waterfall and the students all say shh. Some attention getters don't require any words at all, such as clapping out a beat or ringing a bell. All good attention getters should have 2 parts, a visual and an auditory component. If you notice from the video, the teacher said, eyes on me, and then raised her hand in the air. The auditory part, eyes on me, helps get the class's attention if the students aren't looking at the teacher. The visual part, her hand in the air, can get the class's attention if the class is loud and it's hard to hear. When should you use attention getters? Anytime you want the class's attention. Attention getters are particularly useful when you are transitioning from one activity to the next, and when the students are still talking in their groups or working on an assignment. They can be useful if the students are working on an activity and you have something important you need to say. For example, if you need to provide additional instructions. Attention getters are powerful tools, but try not to overdo it. Only use them if you need to get the class's attention. If you use them too frequently or ask for the class's attention but don't actually need it or use it, students will start to ignore your attention getter. Yelling or shouting at your students does not count as an attention getter. Neither does saying things like, guys, be quiet, or shut up. For an attention getter to be effective, you must remain cool and in control. Phrases like those and yelling at students may momentarily get their attention, but cost you credibility in front of your students, as you won't seem calm or in control of the situation. And whatever you do, do not threaten the students. Saying things like, if you don't pay attention right now, puts you in a no-win situation. Idle threats to your students causes you to lose all credibility. Instead, if your students are responding to your attention getter, we'll discuss some better strategies to use in just a minute. Not sure which attention getter is right for you? Pay attention to other teachers and what attention getters they use. Find one that feels natural. Maybe you prefer one that's simple and to the point. Or maybe you like one that's a little goofy. Or maybe you want to make up one of your own. Also, don't feel that once you've selected an attention getter, you have to use it forever. Feel free to use different attention getters for different situations. For example, you can use give me 10 when the students have materials on their desk and you want them to not touch it. Or you can use a bell for when the class is really loud and can't hear you. You can also use seasonal attention getters. I heard a great one for Halloween. The teacher said hocus pocus, and the student said, everybody focus. Just make sure that you always introduce your attention getter to the students and what you expect from them. Here is another example from our teacher prepping her students before she uses her attention getter.
I need your attention. I'm going to be raising my hand and saying eyes up here or eyes on me, and I would like everybody's attention so that I can tell you the next activity that we're going to be doing.
Prepping your students for how to respond to your attention getter is going to be especially important if you have a call and response. That way the students know how to respond back to your phrase. Once you've introduced your attention getter, you can even practice it with the students before moving on with your lesson. So what do you do if your students aren't responding to your attention getter? That's where our second classroom management strategy comes in, wait time. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You use your attention getter, you may even have the student's attention, but the minute you start to talk, they start to talk as well. Attention getters are great, but they usually aren't effective unless you follow up with a little wait time. Again, wait time is exactly what it sounds like. After you ask for the class's attention, wait for it. Don't move on immediately. Make sure all the students are quiet and focused on you first. If you don't, you run the risk of them talking over you and not paying attention. So how long do you have to wait? As long as you need the class's attention, and then maybe a second or two longer. This may sound simple, but it's actually really hard to do. When you are standing in front of a room full of students, it may seem like they are never going to stop talking and pay attention to you. And you can feel pretty silly standing there quietly with your hand in the air. But trust me, it's worth it. If you don't wait for your class's attention, then the attention getter won't work, and pretty soon your class is going to ignore it altogether. While it may feel like the students are never going to stop talking, they will. Oftentimes, they'll even pressure each other to be quiet, saying things like, "Come on, guys, she's got her hand up." One strategy that I find helpful is to count in my head. First, I say my attention getter, eyes on me. Then I start counting. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi. Again, do this in your head or the students might think you're a little weird. It may seem like an eternity, but in reality, you're only talking about 5 seconds. If the students are still talking, calmly repeat your attention getter and start to count again. You may need to repeat this process 2 or 3 times, but again, your patience will be rewarded. While you are waiting, here are some other strategies you can use, such as nonverbals. For example, move closer to the students that are still off task or talking. We call this proximity. Your physical presence can be enough to get their attention. You can also use eye contact with students that are off task to help get them to pay attention as well. You can also use phrases like, "I'm still waiting on a few students before we can move on," or "I really like how this group is quiet and ready to learn." Try not to point out individual students when you do this. We'll talk more about these nonverbals and phrases in later classroom management microlectures and why they are so effective. Here's an example of our teacher using some of these strategies after she gives her attention getter.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, eyes on me. Okay, like how this group's ready. Just waiting on one more group. Excellent.
Once the class is quiet and you have their attention, you can pause for a second longer if you like. Then thank the class for their attention and begin your instruction. If the class starts to get loud again while you're talking, calmly use your attention getter and begin the process again. You can even tell them that it's important for you to have everyone's attention before you move on. You may have to do this a couple of times throughout the class. That's okay. Remember, you're training your students. The more you use your attention getter correctly and on a consistent basis, the easier it will get. Expect to have to use your attention getter and wait time a lot at the beginning of the year. As the students get more used to both strategies, you will have to use each one less and less. If you're using your attention getter and wait time all the time and it's still not working, you may be overdoing it. You should wait until you have the students' attention, but not much past that. Students will give you their attention, but not forever. If the class is quiet and focused, but you're not utilizing that time, the students will go back to being off task. Ask for their attention, wait for it, And then once you have it, move on. Just like you don't want to overuse your attention getter, don't overuse your wait time. If you find that you're rushing through or skipping your wait time or forgetting to use your attention getter, that's okay. Just start the process over again. Just like it may take your students a while to get good at these strategies, it's going to take you a lot of practice as well. The more you and your class practice, the better you'll all get. Let's recap. In today's classroom management microlecture, we learned about attention getters and wait time. These two strategies go hand in hand, so make sure you use both together. For attention getters, use one that feels natural to you and has a visual and auditory component. Train your students on your attention getter so they know what to expect. After you give your attention getter, use wait time to make sure you have the class's attention before moving on. You may need to repeat your attention getter, use additional wait time, and nonverbals such as eye contact or proximity to make your attention getter more effective. You can also praise students that are paying attention to encourage the rest of the class to do the same. Once you have the class's attention, use it, and then move on with your instruction. Now, let's go over some of the don'ts. Don't move on immediately after saying your attention getter. You need to make sure you have the class's attention by utilizing wait time, or the attention getter won't work. Don't shout, yell, or threaten your students as your attention getter. These strategies are counterproductive and will cause you to lose the respect of your students. Don't overuse your attention getter or wait time. Only ask for the class's attention if you need it, and once you have it, use it. Most importantly, don't give up. Like with all classroom management strategies, practice makes perfect. The more you practice using attention getters and wait time, the better you and your students will get. This has been a UTRGV UTeach Microlecture. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you at the next part of our series on classroom management strategies, Part 2, Nonverbals.